Dr. Krill'aan had 12 tentacles, 3 doctoral degrees, and absolutely no idea what he was getting himself into. Now, before we go any further, let me paint you a picture of our protagonist. Krill'aan was a Velthran, which meant he looked like someone had crossed an octopus with a very disappointed accountant. His species prided themselves on logic, precision, and the ability to hold 12 different writing implements simultaneously during exams. They were, in their own humble opinion, the intellectual backbone of the Galactic Coalition. And Krill'aan? He was the intellectual backbone of the intellectual backbone, top of his class. Published 400 papers, won the prestigious Zorn-Vex Prize for Scientific Excellence twice, which was notable because the prize committee had specifically created a rule against winning it twice after the first time he won it. He was, in short, insufferable. But talented, grudgingly, unavoidably talented. On this particular morning cycle, Krill'aan stood before the Galactic Science Council in their gleaming chamber on Nexus Prime. 17 council members sat in their hovering seats representing 17 different species, all of them looking at Krill'aan with expressions ranging from boredom to active digestive distress. Esteemed colleagues, Krill'aan began, spreading 6 of his tentacles wide in the traditional Velthran gesture of intellectual superiority. I come before you today with a proposal that will revolutionize our understanding of mortality prediction across primitive species. He tapped his presentation console and a holographic display materialized above the council chamber. Predictive mortality modeling, he announced, his voice dripping with the confidence of someone who has never once been proven wrong. The ability to calculate with perfect precision exactly when and how any primitive species will meet its inevitable demise. Councillor Bryn, a Korvathi with scales the color of oxidized copper, leaned forward, and the practical applications, Dr. Krill'aan. Countless. Krill'aan's tentacles waved enthusiastically. Resource allocation for developing worlds, evacuation timing for natural disasters, medical intervention protocols, insurance premium calculations, if we're being honest about where the real funding comes from. A polite ripple of amusement passed through the council. Krill'aan permitted himself a small smile. He had them. He could feel it. The methodology is elegant in its simplicity, he continued. We identify a primitive species. We study their biological limitations, their environmental vulnerabilities, their behavioral stupidity. Then we construct predictive models that calculate their mortality patterns with, I anticipate, 99.7% accuracy. Impressive confidence, Councillor Medic observed dryly. The ancient Silith's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which was either a sign of approval or gastrointestinal distress. With Siliths, you never really knew. Confidence based on preliminary results, Krill'aan assured them. I have already successfully modeled the Dorvan cliff crawlers, the Nexus swamp slugs, and the Tertian fire beetles. All 3 species performed exactly as predicted. Birth rates, death rates, population curves, all of it accurate to within 0.3%. He neglected to mention that cliff crawlers had the cognitive capacity of furniture, swamp slugs reproduced by splitting in half, and fire beetles had a tendency to explode when startled. They were not, strictly speaking, challenging subjects. But the council did not need to know that. Your proposal is approved, Councillor Bryn announced, and Krill'aan felt a surge of triumph warm his central circulation node. However, we will be selecting your test species. The triumph cooled slightly. Of course. That is perfectly acceptable. We have recently made contact with a species from the Outer Rim, Councillor Medic said, and something in the ancient creature's voice made 2 of Krill'aan's hearts skip a beat. They call themselves humans. They come from a planet called Earth. Krill'aan's confidence returned immediately.
Humans.
He had heard of them. Carbon-based bipeds with laughably fragile bodies. No natural armor. No venom. No regenerative capabilities worth mentioning. They could not even breathe underwater. A species so poorly designed that they had to wrap themselves in artificial skins just to survive temperature variations. This would be easy. This would be embarrassingly easy. Humans, he repeated, allowing satisfaction to color his voice. Do you, Councillor Medic said, and those 4 eyes blinked again in that unreadable sequence. A primitive species from a death world, Krill'aan continued, warming to the topic. High gravity, extreme temperature fluctuations, predators on every landmass, catastrophic weather patterns. Their mortality modeling should be almost trivially simple. I predict I will have preliminary results within 3 lunar cycles. We look forward to your findings, Counselor Bryn said, and was that amusement in her voice? Surely not. Your funding has been approved. Your research station has been assigned. You may begin immediately. Krill'aan bowed, all 12 tentacles folding in the formal gesture of gratitude and superiority combined. He had no way of knowing, as he glided out of that council chamber, that he had just made the worst decision of his professional life. He had no way of knowing that those 17 council members were already placing bets on how long he would last. He had no way of knowing that Counselor Medic had studied humans briefly, 15 years ago, and still woke up in cold sweats thinking about what he had witnessed. No, Krill'aan left that chamber confident, ambitious, and absolutely certain that humans would be the easiest research subjects he had ever encountered. The universe, it must be said, has a sense of humor, and it was about to use Dr. Krill'aan as the punchline. The Earth observation station hung in geosynchronous orbit above a landmass the humans called North America. It was a sleek, state-of-the-art facility equipped with the finest sensors, the most advanced analytical software, and one extremely nervous research assistant. Dr. Krill'aan. The small creature bounded toward him the moment he materialized on the transport pad. Welcome, welcome. I am Blip. I will be assisting you. I have prepared everything. The equipment is calibrated. The observation logs are formatted. I have also prepared a welcome basket, but I ate most of it because I was nervous. I apologize. Krill'aan stared down at his new assistant. Blip was a Korani, which meant he was approximately the size of a human house cat, covered in soft blue fur, and possessed of enormous eyes that seemed perpetually startled by existence itself. The Korani were known throughout the galaxy for their exceptional organizational skills and their crippling anxiety disorders. Blip, Krill'aan said slowly. How much of the welcome basket did you eat? All of it, Blip admitted, his large ears folding flat against his head. Except the card. I did not eat the card. The card says, welcome. Krill'aan decided to move on. Show me the observation deck, he commanded, and Blip immediately scurried ahead, his tiny feet clicking against the station floor as he led the way. The observation deck was impressive, Krill'aan had to admit. A massive curved window dominated the space, offering a stunning view of the blue-green planet below. Holographic displays floated at comfortable tentacle height, showing real-time data streams from thousands of surface sensors. Everything was pristine, organized, and ready for serious scientific work. I have selected our first observation target, Blip announced, his anxiety apparently channeling into over-preparation. A human settlement called, let me check my notes, Dayton. It is in a region called Ohio. I do not know what Ohio means. The humans have very confusing names for things. It is irrelevant what Ohio means, Krill'aan said, settling himself into the primary observation chair. Show me the humans. Blip manipulated the controls and the main display zoomed down through the atmosphere, through clouds, through a layer of something the humans called smog, and finally settled on a construction site where a skeletal building was being assembled. There, Blip said, highlighting a figure on the display. That is a human. His name is Doug. He is a construction worker. He is currently 17 meters above ground level on a structure made of metal beams. Krill'aan leaned forward, studying the creature with scientific interest. The human was underwhelming, soft, fleshy, balanced precariously on 2 limbs like some kind of biological joke. It was wearing a bright orange protective shell on its head, which Krill'aan supposed was meant to protect its fragile cranium. The human appeared to be eating something while walking along a beam, no wider than one of Krill'aan's tentacles. Note the lack of any natural safety adaptations, Krill'aan dictated for the record.
Give.
No adhesive pads on the extremities, no prehensile tail for balance, no wings or gliding membranes. This species has clearly not evolved for elevated environments. Mortality probability in this scenario is... He checked his instruments. 73%, he announced with satisfaction. If the human falls, there is a 73% chance of immediate death, and a 24% chance of death within 1 planetary rotation due to injuries. And the remaining 3%? Blip asked. Permanent incapacitation, Krill'aan said. Now we simply observe and wait for the inevitable statistical outcome. He did not have to wait long. The human Doug took a step, His foot landed on a patch of something slick, and his legs went out from under him with a gracelessness that was almost beautiful in its inevitability. "He is falling," Blip squeaked. Krill'aan watched with clinical detachment as the human plummeted. 3 stories, approximately 10 meters. Terminal velocity for a creature of that mass and wind resistance would be. Doug hit the ground. The sound, even filtered through the observation equipment, was deeply unpleasant. Mortality confirmation in 3, 2, 1. Doug sat up. Krill'aan blinked all 4 of his eyes in rapid succession. Doug stood up. That is not possible," Krill'aan said. Doug brushed dirt and debris off his artificial skin coverings. He looked up at the structure he had just fallen from. He said something that the translation software rendered as well. That was stupid. Then he looked at his wrist, where humans apparently kept their timekeeping devices. "Aw man," Doug said. "I missed lunch." And then, with absolutely no acknowledgement that he had just experienced what should have been a fatal plummet, the human walked back toward the structure. He began climbing the ladder to return to the exact same elevation he had just fallen from. Krill'aan's equipment began making a sound he had never heard before. A kind of distressed whining, like a computer trying to divide by 0. "Dr. Krill'aan," Blip said nervously. "I think the equipment is malfunctioning." "The equipment is not malfunctioning," Krill'aan said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "The equipment is fine. But it is making that sound." "The equipment is fine," Krill'aan insisted. "It is the human that is malfunctioning. There is clearly something wrong with that human. It is an anomaly, an outlier. We will observe another specimen and everything will make sense." He believed that, in that moment, he was wrong. The equipment kept making that whining sound for the next 6 months, until it finally gave up and caught fire during the incident with the human who got struck by lightning twice in the same afternoon, and complained only that her hair was now frizzy. But that, as they say, is a story for later. 3 days after the Doug incident, Krill'aan made a decision that would cost him approximately 40% of his fur and most of his remaining sanity. He decided to review human medical records. "This will clarify everything," he assured Blip, who was already showing signs of stress-related fur loss himself. Doug was clearly an anomaly, a statistical outlier. Once we examine the broader medical data, we will see that humans are exactly as fragile as their biology suggests. He pulled up the first file, then the second, then the third. By the 47th file, Krill'aan had not spoken in over an hour, and Blip had begun stress-eating the backup welcome basket he had hidden in his quarters for emergencies. "This is not possible," Krill'aan finally said, his voice hollow. The holographic display in front of him showed a human named Gerald who had been struck by lightning on 7 separate occasions. 7. The man had been hit by atmospheric electrical discharge 7 times, and his primary complaint, according to the medical notes, was that it kept ruining his hats. "It gets worse," Blip whispered, pulling up another file. "Look at this one." A human named Patricia had fallen into industrial machinery and lost an arm. The humans had simply reattached it, sewn it back on like a button on a coat, and it worked. She was back at her job within a year, operating the same machinery that had removed the arm in the first place. "And this one," Blip continued, his voice rising in pitch. "They removed this human's heart. They took out his heart, Dr. Krill'aan. They put in a different heart, from a different human, a dead human, and he lived for another 30 years. Krill'aan stared at the display, all 12 tentacles hanging limp at his sides. The files kept coming. Humans who had been shot multiple times and survived. Humans who had fallen from aircraft and walked away. A human who had been impaled through the skull with a metal rod and not only survived, but reported only mild personality changes. There was an entire category of medical literature devoted to things humans had swallowed accidentally and then passed through their digestive systems naturally, including but not limited to coins, keys, small toys, a light bulb, and in one notable case a live fish. The fish survived as well, Blip noted, somewhat hysterically. They found it a nice pond. "How?" Krill'aan breathed. "How is any of this possible? Their bodies are soft. They have no redundant organs. They cannot regenerate tissue at any meaningful rate. They should not be able to survive any of this." "They should not," a new voice agreed. "And yet," Krill'aan turned to find a Malaxian standing in the doorway of the observation deck. She was tall and willowy with silver skin and 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on her elongated face. She wore the insignia of the Coalition Medical Corps, and there was something in her expression that Krill'aan did not like. It looked like pity. "Dr. Pema," she said, extending a 4-fingered hand. "Chief Medical Officer of this station, I have been studying humans for 37 years. 37 years. Krill'aan repeated, taking her hand in one tentacle. "Then you must have insights, explanations. You must understand how they survive these injuries." "I understand nothing," Dr. Pema said flatly. "That is what 37 years has taught me. I understand nothing, and the more I study them, the less I understand." "That is not scientifically rigorous," Krill'aan protested. "It is the only honest conclusion available," Pema replied. "I have watched humans survive things that would kill any other species in the known galaxy. I have watched them shrug off injuries that should leave them permanently disabled. I have watched them recover from diseases that we do not even have treatments for because we never needed them. No other species survives them long enough to need treatment." She stepped closer, and her voice dropped low. "Listen to me carefully, Dr. Krill'aan. I have read your proposal, predictive mortality modeling. You want to calculate when and how humans will die. That is correct. You cannot." Krill'aan felt a flash of irritation. "With respect, Dr. Pema, I have successfully modeled 17 species. My methodologies are peer-reviewed and statistically sound. I have the finest equipment in the Coalition, a comprehensive data set, and 3 doctoral degrees. And I have 37 years of direct observation." Pema cut in. "Do you know what I have learned in that time? One thing, just one thing, but it is the most important thing you will ever hear about this species." She leaned in close. "The humans do not follow the rules," she said. "Any rules, ever. You give them a rule, and they will break it. Not because they want to cause trouble. Not because they are rebellious. Simply because it does not occur to them that the rule applies to them. Biological rules, physical rules, statistical rules. They break them all constantly, without even noticing they are doing it." "That is ridiculous," Krill'aan said. "Rules are rules. They cannot simply be ignored. Tell that to the humans." I will tell them with data, with evidence, with rigorous scientific methodology." Dr. Pema looked at him for a long moment, and that pity in her expression deepened into something closer to sorrow. "Good luck, Dr. Krill'aan," she said quietly. "You are going to need it." Then she turned and left. Krill'aan watched her go, then turned back to his displays with renewed determination. 37 years, and she had given up, admitted defeat, accepted ignorance. He would not make the same mistake. He had science on his side. He had logic. He had methodology. And he was going to crack the human code, if it killed him. It would not kill him as it turned out, but it would come closer than he ever imagined possible. 2 weeks into his research, Krill'aan had a revelation. The problem was not human biology. He had studied their biology extensively, and it was exactly as pathetic as he had initially assessed. Soft tissue, brittle bones, laughably slow healing. No, the biology was not the issue. The problem was human psychology, specifically their apparent inability to recognize when they were beaten. "We have been approaching this incorrectly," he announced to Blip one morning, his tentacles waving with renewed excitement. "We have been trying to predict when humans will die, but first we must understand when humans will quit. Once we identify their psychological breaking points, their giving up thresholds, we can model their mortality with precision." Blip looked up from the comfort blanket he had started carrying everywhere. "How do we measure a giving up threshold?" "Simple," Krill'aan said. "We create scenarios with no solution, and measure how long they persist before accepting defeat. Every species has a limit. Every creature eventually recognizes futility and conserves its energy. We find that limit for humans, and we have our baseline." It was, on paper, an excellent plan. Papers, unfortunately, do not account for humans. The first test subject was a female human named Betty. She was 67 years old, which Krill'aan understood to be elderly by human standards. Her file indicated she was a marathon runner, which meant she engaged in the baffling human practice of running extreme distances for no reason whatsoever. No predator chasing her, no resources at the destination, just running, for hours, because she apparently enjoyed it. Krill'aan found this deeply suspicious, but pressed on. The test was elegantly designed. A maze constructed in a holographic environment linked to a treadmill system that Betty would run on. The maze was complex, challenging, and most importantly, completely unsolvable. There was no exit. Every path led to a dead end. The optimal strategy, the logical strategy, was to recognize the impossibility and stop. Beginning the trial, Krill'aan announced, settling into his observation chair. Subject will enter the maze and attempt to find the exit. I predict she will quit within 30 minutes. 60 at the absolute maximum. Blip. Start the timer. Timer started. Blip confirmed. Betty entered the maze. She jogged forward with a relaxed, easy stride. 30 minutes passed. Betty was still jogging, still exploring, still turning down dead ends and backtracking without any visible frustration. Krill'aan leaned forward slightly. 60 minutes passed. Betty had now covered the entire maze twice. She had encountered every dead end, mapped every false path. She knew she must know that there was no exit. She kept running. Perhaps she has not yet realized the maze is unsolvable, Krill'aan reasoned. Humans are not known for their intelligence. She will figure it out soon. 90 minutes. 2 hours. 3 hours. Betty kept running. She was humming now. Actually humming a little tune to herself as she jogged through a maze specifically designed to break her spirit. This is unexpected, Krill'aan admitted. 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Krill'aan had stopped taking notes. He was simply staring at the display, watching this elderly human female jog endlessly through an impossible maze with what appeared to be genuine contentment. Dr. Krill'aan, Blip said quietly, I need to eat something, and use the facilities, and perhaps have a small breakdown. Can we pause the experiment? No, Krill'aan said.
She must stop soon. She must.
It has been 6 hours. 6 hours, Blip. No creature can persist at a futile task for 6 hours. 7 hours. 8 hours. At the 9-hour mark, Krill'aan broke. End the trial, he croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. End it. I cannot. I need to stop. End the trial. Blip terminated the holographic maze with visible relief. Betty slowed to a stop on the treadmill, blinking as the maze dissolved around her. She checked the timekeeping device on her wrist, then looked up at the observation window with a cheerful expression. Oh, is it over already? She asked, not even breathing hard. That was fun. Felt like a good workout. Kept my heart rate up the whole time. Krill'aan could not find words. The maze was tricky, Betty continued, wiping a small amount of perspiration from her forehead with a cloth. Couldn't find the exit, but that's okay. It's about the journey, you know. The exit isn't really the point. The exit isn't really the point. The words echoed in Krill'aan's mind like a death knell for his entire research methodology. So, Betty said, bouncing slightly on her toes with an energy that seemed almost aggressive given the circumstances. Do you have a harder one? Krill'aan ended the session without responding. He sat in his observation chair for another hour after Betty had been transported back to Earth, staring at nothing. That night, Blip woke up screaming from a nightmare. She would not stop, he whimpered, when Krill'aan found him huddled in the corner of his quarters. She just kept running, running and running and running, and she was smiling. Dr. Krill'aan. She was smiling the whole time. It was only a dream, Krill'aan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Was it? Blip asked. Was it? Krill'aan did not have an answer. He returned to his own quarters and attempted to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes he saw Betty jogging through that maze, humming, smiling, asking for something harder. The humans did not know when to quit. That was the first real data point Krill'aan collected. It would not be the most disturbing. After the Betty incident, Krill'aan spent 3 days recalibrating his entire theoretical framework. There had to be an explanation, a logical, rational, scientifically valid explanation for why humans persisted beyond all reasonable thresholds. Every behavior in nature had a purpose. Every trait provided some advantage. Evolution did not create creatures that wasted energy on pointless activities. They must be getting something out of it. he reasoned to Blip, who had developed a nervous twitch in his left ear that had not stopped since the maze trial. Some resource, some advantage, something we are not seeing. I need to interview a human directly. Get inside their reasoning process. Blip's twitch intensified. Is that safe? They are primitive beings. Blip, I think I can handle a conversation. The interview subject was a human male named Callum. He was an engineer, which meant he solved complex problems for a living. Surely, Krill'aan thought, an engineer would be able to articulate the logical motivations behind human persistence. Engineers understood efficiency. They understood resource management. They would not waste energy on futile tasks. Callum materialized in the station's interview chamber, looked around with mild interest and said, "Nice place. Love what you've done with the sterile, vaguely menacing atmosphere." Krill'aan chose to ignore this. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview," he said formally. "I am studying human behavioral patterns, specifically your species' tendency to continue tasks well beyond the point of logical return. I am hoping you can provide insight." "You want to know why we don't give up?" Callum asked, settling into the provided chair with an ease that suggested he was already entirely too comfortable. "Precisely. Even when we should?" "Yes." Callum considered this for a moment. "Spite," he said. Krill'aan waited for him to continue. Callum did not continue. "I am sorry," Krill'aan said slowly. "I do not think the translation software is functioning correctly. It rendered your answer as spite." "That's right. Spite. Yep. The emotion characterized by a desire to harm, annoy, or offend another being. That's the one." Krill'aan felt two of his tentacles go numb. "I do not understand," he admitted. "How is spite a motivation to continue a difficult task? Spite requires a target, someone to harm or offend. If you are alone, working on a problem, there is no one to spite." "Oh, there's always someone to spite," Callum said cheerfully. "The universe, for starters. The universe doesn't think you can do something, so you do it anyway just to prove it wrong. Or maybe someone told you that you couldn't do it. A teacher, a parent, a boss. Maybe they told you years ago. Maybe they're dead now. Doesn't matter. You still do it, just to prove them wrong." "But they would never know," Krill'aan sputtered. "If they are dead, they cannot observe your success. The spite serves no purpose." "The purpose is the spite itself," Callum said, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "It's not about them knowing. It's about you knowing. It's about looking at something that should have beaten you and saying, 'Not today, you absolute bastard.'" Krill'aan's analytical mind attempted to process this and encountered critical errors. Spite provided no resources. You could not eat spite. You could not trade spite for goods or services. Spite offered no reproductive advantage. Potential mates were not attracted to spiteful individuals. If anything, spite was a negative trait in mate selection across most species. Spite gained no territory. Spite established no dominance hierarchies. Spite by every objective measure was a complete waste of biological energy. And yet humans used it as fuel. "Let me make sure I understand," Krill'aan said, his voice strained. "You will expend enormous amounts of energy, risk physical harm, sacrifice comfort and resources, all to accomplish a task simply because someone or something suggested you could not." "Now you're getting it," Callum said. "Even if the task provides no tangible benefit. Especially then, the less benefit, the more pure the spite. Even if the task actively harms you." Callum laughed. It was not a comforting sound. "Listen," he said. "There's a human saying, 'Cut off your nose to spite your face.' You know what that means. It means humans will literally damage themselves if it means proving a point. We'll set ourselves on fire just to make someone else feel the heat. Is it logical? Absolutely not. Do we do it anyway? Every single day." Krill'aan sat in silence for a long moment. "You are describing a species of insane people," he finally said. "Yeah," Callum agreed.
Oh.
"But we're really productive, insane people. You know how many things got invented out of spite? Lot. Someone said it couldn't be done, and some spiteful lunatic said, 'Watch me.' That's like half of human progress right there." The interview continued for another hour, but Krill'aan barely heard any of it. His mind was stuck on a single terrible realization. Humans did not persist because they hoped to succeed. They did not persist because success was likely. They persisted because something somewhere had implied they might fail, and that was unacceptable to them. Not for any logical reason. Just because. When Callum was transported back to Earth, Krill'aan sat alone in the interview chamber for a very long time. Blip found him there 2 hours later. "Dr. Krill'aan," the small assistant asked, Are you well?" "I am reconsidering every assumption I have ever made about the nature of motivation," Krill'aan replied distantly. "Oh," Blip said, "is that good?" "No, Blip. No, it is not." That night, Dr. Pema found Blip in the medical bay requesting sedatives for what he described as persistent intrusive thoughts about humans setting themselves on fire for emotional satisfaction. She prescribed the sedatives without comment. She had seen this before. It was only the beginning. In an attempt to restore some sense of normalcy to his research, Krill'aan decided to observe baseline human behavior. No experiments, no interviews. Just simple, passive observation of humans in their natural habitat. "We will watch them work," he told Blip, who had started sleeping with the lights on. "Humans spend a significant portion of their lives engaged in labor. It should be straightforward, predictable. This will give us stable data to build from." They selected an office building in a human city called Chicago. Inside, hundreds of humans sat in small enclosures called cubicles, staring at glowing screens and tapping on input devices. It was, Krill'aan thought, almost peaceful. Then he noticed Denise. Denise was a middle-aged human female in a cubicle on the 17th floor. According to station sensors, she had been in that cubicle for 18 consecutive hours. She had not slept. She had not eaten any substantial food. She had not stopped working. "That cannot be accurate," Krill'aan said, checking the sensors. "Humans require sleep. Their cognitive function degrades rapidly without it. After 18 hours of continuous consciousness, she should be experiencing hallucinations, motor control failure, emotional instability." He zoomed in on Denise. She was typing efficiently, her focus sharp, her movements precise. She did not look like someone experiencing cognitive degradation. She looked like someone who had made a personal choice to simply not require sleep, and expected the universe to accommodate her. "What is she consuming?" Krill'aan demanded. "She must be using some kind of stimulant." Blip analyzed the sensor data. "She has consumed, let me see, 7 cups of a liquid substance. The humans call it coffee." "Coffee," Krill'aan repeated. "Run a chemical analysis." The results appeared on his display. Krill'aan stared at them. Then he ran the analysis again. The results did not change. "This is a poison," he said slowly. "Blip, this is literally a poison. The primary active compound is a neurotoxin. It causes increased cardiac rate, elevated blood pressure, vasoconstriction, and disruption of natural sleep hormones. In sufficient quantities, it would cause seizures and cardiac arrest in most known species." "Yes," Blip said, "and she has had 7 cups of it. Voluntarily. It appears so." Krill'aan pulled up broader data on coffee consumption across the human population. What he found made his chromatophores go pale. Humans consumed this poison constantly, daily, multiple times daily. They consumed it first thing in the morning to counteract their natural waking state, which was apparently unsatisfactory to them. They consumed it throughout the day to maintain artificial alertness. They had developed elaborate rituals around its preparation and consumption. They had built entire economic systems around its trade. "They give it to their children," Blip whispered, his voice horrified. "In some cultures they give coffee to children." "What kind of species poisons its own young?" Krill'aan breathed. "It gets worse," Blip said, and he looked like he very much did not want to deliver the next piece of information. There are stronger versions. They call them energy drinks." He pulled up the chemical analysis. Krill'aan read it. Blip fainted. He simply dropped, straight down, his small blue body crumpling to the floor of the observation deck like a puppet with cut strings. Krill'aan barely noticed. He was too busy staring at the analysis of something called Red Bull, which contained enough stimulants to kill a Korani instantly, and which humans apparently consumed before engaging in physical recreation. For fun. They drank poison for fun and then exercised. The medical bay doors opened, and Dr. Pema rushed in. She had been alerted by the station's automated health monitoring systems. She knelt beside Blip, ran a scanner over him, and administered a mild stimulant to bring him around. "What happened?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Energy drinks," Krill'aan said hollowly. Pema nodded slowly, as if this were a perfectly expected response. "He will be fine," she said, helping the groggy Blip into a sitting position. "Physical shock, nothing more. I see it often with new researchers." She looked up at Krill'aan, and there was that expression again, that pity. "I warned you," she said quietly. "The humans do not follow rules. That includes biological rules, toxicity thresholds, sleep requirements. They simply decide these rules are inconvenient and ignore them." "You cannot ignore toxicity thresholds," Krill'aan insisted. "That is not how biochemistry works. Tell that to the humans." "I am telling it to you. These are not suggestions, they are physical laws. You cannot simply choose to not be poisoned by a poison." Dr. Pema helped Blip to his feet. The small Qurani was shaking, his fur standing on end. "Dr. Krill'aan," Pema said, guiding Blip toward the door. "I have watched humans drink coffee, consume energy drinks, and ingest a substance called pre-workout that is technically classified as a controlled compound on 6 coalition worlds. Then I have watched them go for a run, voluntarily, for enjoyment." She paused at the door. "You are trying to apply logic to a species that looked at poison and said yes, but what if I just drank a little bit of it every morning? You will not win this fight." "It is not a fight," Krill'aan called after her. "It is research." "Same thing," Pema said. "With humans, it is always the same thing." The door closed behind her. Krill'aan turned back to his displays. Denise was still working, still typing, still functioning on 18 hours of no sleep and 7 cups of a neurotoxin. She was apparently about to have an 8th cup. Krill'aan watched her pour it, watched her drink it, watched her go back to work as if she had not just willingly ingested something that would have killed him twice over. He was beginning to understand in a dim and terrible way that Dr. Pema might have been right about everything. He was not ready to admit that yet. But the understanding was there, lurking at the edges of his mind. Growing. 1 month into the research project, Krill'aan made a decision that he would later describe as the moment his sanity began its terminal decline. He decided to study human emotional breaking points. "We have examined physical persistence," he explained to Blip, who had taken to wearing a small helmet at all times in case he fainted again. "We have examined spite-based motivation. We have examined their inexplicable relationship with poison. Now we must examine their psychological limits. Every species has a threshold of accumulated trauma beyond which they simply stop, shut down, cease to function. We will find that threshold for humans." He said this with confidence. He should not have. The subject was a human male named Franklin, age 43, and his file was, even by human standards, catastrophic. In the span of a single Earth year, Franklin had lost his business to bankruptcy. He had lost his home to foreclosure. His wife had left him for his former business partner. His car had been repossessed. His credit rating, whatever that meant, had been destroyed. He had been forced to move into a smaller, older car that he had purchased with the last of his savings. He was, by any objective measure, ruined. Krill'aan studied the file with something approaching satisfaction. Finally, a human who had hit the wall. A human who had experienced so much loss, so much failure, so much psychological damage, that he would have no choice but to shut down. "Locate him," Krill'aan ordered. "I want to observe his current state." Blip tracked Franklin to a parking lot behind a shopping center in a city called Memphis. He was living in his car, a battered vehicle that appeared to be held together primarily by rust and optimism. Krill'aan activated the observation feed, and felt his remaining confidence begin to crumble. Franklin was not shut down. Franklin was not curled in a ball, weeping, catatonic with despair. Franklin was sitting in the driver's seat of his terrible car, eating a sandwich and talking on a communication device. He was smiling. "Yeah, I know it's a risk, but that's what I said last time and it worked out for a while," Franklin was saying. "Listen, I've got the idea, I've got the skills, I just need a little capital to get started. No, it's a different market this time. Learned from my mistakes. You can't keep a good man down, am I right?" He laughed. He actually laughed. What is he doing? Krill'aan whispered. Blip checked the data. It appears he is starting a new business. That is not possible. He has filed paperwork. He is seeking investors. He has created a business plan. He is doing it from his car. Krill'aan's left eye began to twitch. He had never had a twitch before. It was not a Velthran trait. Apparently it was now. Patch me into his communication frequency. Krill'aan ordered. I need to speak to this human directly. The connection was established. Franklin looked up at his communication device surprised. Hello? Franklin, Krill'aan said, dispensing with pleasantries. I am a researcher studying human behavior. I have reviewed your file. Halls, in the past year you have lost your business, your home, your wife, and your vehicle. You are currently living in a car in a parking lot. You have no resources, no support system, and no logical reason for optimism. And yet you are starting a new business. Explain. There was a pause. Then Franklin laughed again. Well, when you put it like that, it does sound pretty crazy, he admitted. But here's the thing. Rock bottom has great foundations. Krill'aan waited for clarification. Franklin provided it. When you've lost everything, you've got nothing left to lose, he said. No risk. Right. I've already hit the worst. Everything from here is up. Plus, I know what not to do now. I've got experience. I've got wisdom. I've got a really clear idea of what went wrong and how to avoid it. That's valuable. You can't buy that kind of education. You did not receive an education, Krill'aan said, his voice strained. You experienced catastrophic failure. Same thing, Franklin said. Listen, I appreciate the call, but I've got to go. I've got a meeting with a potential investor in an hour and I need to find somewhere to freshen up. But hey, if you're interested in getting in on the ground floor of a revolutionary new pet grooming service, give me a call back. I'll cut you a good deal. The connection terminated. Krill'aan sat in silence. Rock bottom has great foundations. The words echoed in his mind, meaningless and profound simultaneously. He looked down at his tentacles and noticed, with distant horror, that he was losing fur, small clumps of it, falling onto his workstation, stress-related fur loss, a condition he had only ever read about in medical journals. The human subjects were thriving. The researcher was deteriorating. There was a lesson in there somewhere, but Krill'aan was not ready to learn it. Dr. Krill'aan, Blip said quietly. Should I call Dr. Pema? No, Krill'aan said. We continue. We gather more data. There must be a pattern. There must be a breaking point. We simply have not found it yet. And if there is no breaking point? Krill'aan did not answer. He could not answer. Because he was beginning to suspect in the deepest and most horrified part of his mind that Blip might be right. What if humans simply did not break? What if they just kept going and going and going no matter what the universe threw at them? What did you do with a species like that? How did you model the mortality of something that refused to acknowledge defeat? Krill'aan looked at his reflection in the darkened display screen. He looked terrible, fur patchy, eyes bloodshot, tentacles limp with exhaustion. Franklin, living in his car with nothing, had looked healthier. The irony was not lost on him. It just made everything worse. At the 6-week mark, Krill'aan made a decision born of pure desperation. He would study human history. Perhaps, he reasoned, the individual humans he had observed were anomalies, exceptional specimens. Maybe the species as a whole was more fragile, more predictable. Maybe their historical record would show the normal patterns of rise and fall, growth and collapse, that every other species demonstrated. He accessed the Earth historical archives. He started reading. He did not stop for 3 days. When Blip finally found him, Krill'aan was sitting in the dark, surrounded by holographic displays, showing timelines, population graphs and images of human disasters. His fur had continued falling out. He had not eaten. His eyes had a hollow, haunted quality that Blip had previously only seen in photographs of human soldiers. Dr. Krill'aan? Blip asked carefully. You have not responded to any communications. Dr. Pema is concerned. I am also concerned. Mostly I am scared, but there is concern mixed in. Krill'aan did not look at him. They survived ice ages. Blip, he said, his voice flat. Plural. Multiple ice ages. The planet froze. and they just kept going. They wrapped themselves in animal skins, huddled in caves, and waited it out for thousands of years. That is impressive? It is insane, but it gets worse. Krill'aan gestured at one of the displays. Plagues, blip, diseases that killed half their population. Half. Do you understand? Half of all humans dead. Do you know what they did afterward? Blip shook his head. They invented better medicine. They created systems of sanitation. They built hospitals. They came out of the plague stronger and more advanced than they went in. Krill'aan's tentacles twitched erratically. The dying made them better at living. He pulled up another display. Wars, he continued. Endless wars. They fight constantly. They have developed increasingly efficient methods of killing each other. At one point they created weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. And they stopped? Blip asked hopefully. They recognized the danger and disarmed. No, Blip. They used them. Blip's ears flattened. Twice, Krill'aan said. They detonated nuclear weapons on their own population. 2 cities vaporized, hundreds of thousands dead instantly, radiation poisoning for generations. He turned to look at Blip, and his eyes were wild. Do you know what happened next? Do you know what the logical outcome of that should have been? Collapse, Blip whispered. Extinction. They rebuilt the cities, both of them. They are thriving today. One of them is famous for its food. Blip sat down heavily. They should have gone extinct, Krill'aan said, turning back to his displays. By every standard metric, they should have died out a dozen times over. Ice ages, plagues, wars, famines, natural disasters, self-inflicted disasters. Disasters they created specifically to inflict on each other. Every single time they should have collapsed. Every single time they came back stronger. He pulled up a population graph. The line started low, dipped during various catastrophes, and then climbed, and climbed, and climbed. 8 billion humans now. 8 billion, on a planet that had tried to kill them countless times. I have been wrong, Krill'aan said quietly. About everything, my entire theoretical framework. Wrong. What do you mean? Krill'aan turned to face his assistant fully. I assumed humans were surviving despite adversity, he said, that they were enduring hardship, pushing through it, coming out the other side diminished but alive. That is how it works for every other species. You encounter a challenge, you survive it, you are weakened by it. He gestured at the displays. That is not what humans do. Humans do not survive despite adversity. They survive because of it. The adversity makes them stronger. It makes them smarter. It makes them more determined. Every catastrophe is a lesson. Every near extinction is a motivation. They do not endure hardship. They metabolize it. They convert it into fuel. He laughed, and there was no humor in it. I have been trying to predict when they will break, he said. But they do not break. They bend. They absorb. They adapt. And then they come back harder than before. You cannot model that, Blip. You cannot put that in an equation. How do you predict the mortality of a species that treats extinction events as professional development? Blip did not have an answer. Neither did Krill'aan. But for the first time since the project began, he was starting to understand the shape of the problem. And it was much, much worse than he had imagined. 6 months after he had first stood before the Galactic Science Council, brimming with confidence and certainty, Dr. Krill'aan returned to the same chamber. He was not the same Velthron. His fur had gone patchy and gray. His tentacles, once held high in intellectual superiority, now hung limp at his sides. He had lost weight. He had developed a permanent twitch in 3 of his 4 eyes. He looked, according to Blip's private assessment, like someone who had stared into the void and discovered the void was doing jumping jacks and asking if he wanted to go for a run. The 17 council members watched him approach the presentation platform with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern to what appeared to be barely concealed amusement. Dr. Krill'aan, Councillor Bryn said, "We have been anticipating your findings. Your preliminary reports have been, shall we say, unusual." Unusual, Krill'aan repeated, and something in his voice made several council members shift uncomfortably. Yes, I suppose that is one word for it. He activated his presentation display. 6 months ago, he began. I stood before this council and proposed a research project to develop predictive mortality modeling for humans. I told you it would be simple. I told you I would have results within 3 lunar cycles. I told you my methodology was sound, my equipment was state-of-the-art, and my confidence was justified. He paused. I was wrong about all of it. Everything I told you was wrong. The display flickered to life, showing data charts, graphs, and observational recordings. All of them contradicted each other. All of them defied logical interpretation. Humans cannot be modeled, Krill'aan said. They cannot be predicted. They cannot be understood through any conventional scientific framework. They are, and I do not use this term lightly, impossible. Counselor Medic leaned forward, his 4 eyes blinking in that unreadable sequence. Explain. They survive things that should kill them. They continue tasks that provide no benefit. They persist through hardships that should break them psychologically. They consume poison recreationally. They have survived multiple extinction-level events and emerged stronger each time. Krill'aan's voice was rising now, taking on a slightly hysterical edge. Their primary motivational force appears to be spite. Spite. They will destroy themselves to prove a point to someone who is not even watching. A ripple of murmurs passed through the council. Dr. Krill'aan, Counselor Bryn said carefully. These claims are extraordinary. I have evidence. Krill'aan pulled up a video file. This was recorded 3 weeks ago in a human city called Toronto. Watch. The display showed a street scene. A vehicle had malfunctioned and struck a smaller vehicle, pinning it against a barrier. Inside the smaller vehicle, visible through the shattered window, was a human child. The child was alive but trapped. A human female ran toward the wreckage. She was small, perhaps 50 kilograms. The vehicle pinning the child weighed approximately 2,000 kilograms. The council watched as the human female gripped the frame of the larger vehicle and lifted it. She lifted 2,000 kilograms of metal and machinery, held it long enough for another human to pull the child free, and then dropped it. Then she collapsed. Impossible, Counselor Venn said immediately. That is physically impossible. Human musculature cannot generate that force. You have fabricated this footage. I have not fabricated anything, Krill'aan shouted, and several council members flinched. He had never raised his voice in this chamber before. He had never raised his voice anywhere before. It is called hysterical strength. Under extreme stress, humans can temporarily override their physical limitations. Their bodies are capable of far more than their brains normally allow, and in moments of crisis they can access that capability. They lift vehicles. They run on broken legs. They fight off predators twice their size. The limits are not real. The limits are suggestions that they simply choose to ignore. Dr. Krill'aan, Counselor Bryn said firmly. Control yourself. I cannot control myself. I have spent 6 months trying to apply scientific rigor to a species that does not acknowledge scientific rigor. They do not follow biological rules. They do not follow psychological rules. They do not follow the basic fundamental principles of survival that every other species in the known galaxy adheres to. He was waving his tentacles now, his whole body shaking. You asked me to model their mortality. I am telling you it cannot be done. You might as well ask me to model chaos. You might as well ask me to predict the behavior of a system that actively resists prediction. They are not a species. They are a statistical anomaly that learned to walk upright and drink poison. Silence fell over the chamber. Then slowly Counselor Venn began to laugh. Others joined in. I think, Counselor Bryn said, amusement clear in her voice, that Dr. Krill'aan has allowed his research to compromise his objectivity. 6 months studying primitives, and he has gone native. I have not gone native, Krill'aan protested. I have data. I have evidence. I have 6 months of observations that all point to the same conclusion. You have a breakdown, Counselor Medic said quietly. That is what you have. Security. Counselor Bryn called. Please escort Dr. Krill'aan to the medical wing. He is clearly unwell. 2 security officers approached the platform. No, Krill'aan said, backing away. No, you have to listen. You have to understand what they are. You have to. But no one was listening. The council members had already turned away, dismissing him, dismissing his research, dismissing everything he had learned in 6 months of the most harrowing scientific work of his life. He was escorted out. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that he knew he was right. He knew it. And no one would ever believe him. The observation station was quiet. Krill'aan sat in the primary observation chair, staring out at the blue-green planet below. Earth, home of the humans, source of his professional destruction and personal unraveling. He had been sitting there for 6 hours. He was not sure what he was waiting for. Behind him the door opened, and small footsteps clicked across the floor. "Dr. Krill'aan," Blip said softly, "I have arranged transport back to Velthra. We can leave whenever you are ready. I have also taken the liberty of packing your personal items, and I made you a sandwich, but I ate it because I was nervous. I apologize." Krill'aan did not respond. Blip moved closer, his large eyes filled with concern. "It is over," the small Korani said gently. "The research is finished. The council has rejected your findings. Your funding has been revoked. There is nothing left to do here. We should go home. You can rest, recover. Perhaps in time you can rebuild your career with a different project, something simpler, something that makes sense." Krill'aan was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was not a healthy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had just realized something profound and terrible and hilarious all at once. "Go home," he repeated. "Abandon the research. Give up." "Yes," Blip said hopefully. "That is the logical course of action." "The logical course of action," Krill'aan said. And he laughed again. "Blip, do you know what the humans would do in this situation? If their work had been rejected, if their careers had been destroyed, if everyone told them they were wrong and to give up?" Blip's ears flattened. He knew where this was going. He did not like where this was going. "They would keep going," Krill'aan said. "Out of spite, out of stubbornness, out of irrational, illogical, statistically unjustifiable hope. They would look at everyone who doubted them and say, 'Watch me.'" He turned to face Blip, and there was something new in his eyes. Something that had not been there before. Something that looked terrifyingly like determination. "I am not going home," Krill'aan said. "I am not abandoning this research. The council thinks I am wrong. They think I fabricated my data. They think I have lost my mind." He stood up from the chair, and for the first time in weeks, his tentacles lifted with purpose. "Then I will prove them wrong. I will continue this research. I will gather more evidence. I will study every aspect of human behavior until I have a dataset so comprehensive, so undeniable, that they will have no choice but to accept my conclusions. And if they still reject me, I will keep going anyway. Because I am right. I know I am right, and I will not stop until everyone else knows it too." Blip stared at him in horror. "Dr. Krill'aan," he whispered, "you have caught it. The human disease. You have become like them." "Yes," Krill'aan agreed. "I believe I have." He should have been disturbed by this realization. He was not. He was in fact exhilarated. The door opened again, and Dr. Pema entered. She took in the scene with her 3 eyes, noting Krill'aan's posture, his expression, the manic energy that now radiated from him. "Ah," she said, "I see." "You see what?" Krill'aan asked. "I have seen it before," Pema said. "Researchers who study humans long enough, they start to become like them. The persistence, the spite, the irrational refusal to accept defeat." She paused. "It is, as far as I can tell, irreversible." "You do not seem concerned," Krill'aan observed. "I am not. I went through it myself, 15 years ago. Why do you think I am still here?" She reached into her coat and pulled out a small container. "I brought you something. I thought you might need it." She handed him the container. Krill'aan opened it. Inside was a dark liquid, hot, aromatic, immediately recognizable. "Coffee." "This is poison," he said. "Yes," Pema agreed. He looked at her. He looked at the coffee. He looked at Blip, who was making small distressed sounds. He drank it. It was terrible, bitter and harsh, and somehow both too hot and not hot enough. It burned his throat and made his primary stomach clench in protest. "Another cup," he said. Pema smiled. It was, Krill'aan thought, the smile of someone welcoming a new member to a very exclusive and very unfortunate club. "Welcome to human studies," she said. long term. And so Dr. Krill'aan, disgraced scientist, academic pariah, former pride of the Velthran intellectual establishment, sat down at his workstation and began a new research proposal. He titled it, How to Live Like a Human Without Dying. He was not entirely sure it was possible. But that, he was learning, was not really the point. Now you might be wondering what the lesson is here, what the moral of this story might be, and I will tell you because I think it is important. Humans are not a species to be studied. They are not a puzzle to be solved, a code to be cracked, a mystery to be unraveled. Humans are a species to be survived. They will outlast you. They will outstubborn you. They will persist long after you have given up, fueled by nothing but spite, and coffee, and the absolute refusal to accept that anything is impossible. They are frustrating and illogical and terrifying. And somewhere along the way, if you are not careful, you will find yourself becoming just like them. Dr. Krill'aan took another sip of his coffee. It was still terrible. He was already planning his 9th cup.